Hello again. This week we're going to look at a feature about out of period production of flatware, that styles of spoon that are much older that get revived and the reasons it happens. And, I hope, just as a side note, I hope you're enjoying these things. I'm very bored. I watch a lot of things on YouTube. There isn't anything that's educational. Lots of young women in tight tops looking at antiques, and lots of men in very sharp suits doing it, trying to sell you something. Hopefully, even though I am an eccentrically bearded, strange gentleman of indeterminate age, the things I'm telling you will be of some practical use if you're a collector going out into the world trying to find things. That's all it is. I'm just trying to be useful and pass on what the tiny amount that I've learned in 30 odd years doing this. Some of it's probably wrong, but we go on. So I'm sorry it's dusty and there aren't lots of things happening and we're not whizzing about with the camera. But this is it. It's an old man talking. If it's not your bag, I completely understand. But we go on. Now, the reason I'm talking about out of period flatware is because I bought some only a couple of weeks ago. Now, I'll show you. We'll do the close-ups afterwards, but they'll start to become a bit briefer, I think, because there's only so much close-up work you can do without getting a bit tired of it. But hopefully you'll see all the detailing close up quite quickly. But there's a nice spoon. It's by a maker called Charles Fletcher, who you probably haven't come across. It wouldn't surprise me if you hadn't. And it was made in London, or assayed in London, in 1927. And you won't see this pattern of flatware, certainly in English silver, anywhere else. I've never come across it. It's a sort of shortened fiddle with an upturned stem, which makes you think of continental flatware, and this rather delightful, all this hand engraving, and this anthemian, but it's quite a stylised one. It's quite square, it's quite angular, it's quite deco. And you might easily think that this is some sort of interpretation of an earlier style with a strong deco influence, produced in the middle of the 20s, a bit like the French silver, table silver produced by people like Puy-Forcat in Paris. And if you saw this independently of anything else, that's probably the conclusion I would come to, and you would come to, and people that know about spoons would come to, apart from the fact that I bought this, because you're probably thinking, why did you buy this unusual pattern 1920s spoon? Well, there are actually a set of 4 of them, which is always nice. I didn't buy them for these. I bought them for these. These are the matching forks, but these are not made by Charles Fletcher in London in 1927. And you'll see a close-up of the marks in the next film, but they are in fact by a Dutch maker, and these are mid-18th century. These are by Hendrik Kramer, Amsterdam, 1753. They're incredibly rare. I've not seen the pattern before, and they have lovely, unlike the spoons, they have lovely big period armorials on the back of them. And you'll know by now I'm a sucker for an armorial. So this is what happens with out of period flatware. This is an example. A family has had a set of forks, dessert forks. They probably had the table forks as well. They might have had other pieces, but they lacked the entire service. Now, why does this happen? It happens because families inherit, 2 or more siblings inherit a table service. And to begin with, that can be quite large. It doesn't need to be a 12-place setting. For some of the noble and aristocratic families, it's 24-place setting, sometimes 48-place setting or more. So they divide it up. To be fair, they divide it up. One will take a dozen, one will take a dozen. Perhaps then it goes on another generation, and someone will have 6 of some and 6 of another, but they want 12. So what do? So 2 generations, 3 generations, 5 generations later, they approach a silversmith and they say, can you make me the pieces I'm missing? Now, with something as unusual as this pattern, and we'll look at it in detail, again, I must stress, I've never seen this pattern anywhere else. It's never turned up, this odd Dutch rare pattern. They've had to go to someone like Fletcher. Fletcher, originally from Sheffield, you'll see a lot of his work assayed in Sheffield, but he did then branch out and buy a small London company and expand his business, which is why these are assayed later in his career in London, trained as a hand forger. And that's not forger as in the sense of making forgeries, but that's the hand forging of flatware. It's a specific skill. We say silversmith, but there are lots of different branches of silversmithing, particularly when you go back 100, 200 years. And Fletcher specialised in hand-forged, hand-shaped silver spoons. Now, at this time, obviously, a lot of silver was mechanised in production. It was die-struck, it was rolled. There were stamps, fly presses to cut out the blanks. There was an air of mechanisation. But how do you mechanise the production of a pattern you've never seen before? You can't. Or you can't do it cost effectively. What you have to do is have someone who is skilled as a hand forger, and they will work up from a blank, possibly a die-struck blank, possibly not, and they will hand forge that pattern to copy this. And this is what Fletcher has done. So remarkably, each one of these spoons, at a time when sort of mass production of flatware was rife, is made just as it would have been in the 18th century. It's all had to be hand forged, hand raised, time consuming, highly skilled, which is why Fletcher isn't a name you'll come across that often, but he was one of the people that could actually still do this, which is why he's had to, someone has probably subcontracted this work out to him, but that's why these spoons bear his mark. And he's, done all of this beautiful engraving on them as well to match. But also, when we look at these in detail, well, I'm going to compare one against the other, you'll see when you put them side by side, even though they look all the same, there are differences, undeniable differences. So this is the production of out of period flatware, but there are other ways that you can do it. There are 2 other ways. Now I'm going to show you those in the film that comes up next, part 2. So these things aren't too long, and then we'll do the close-ups. But hold hard, and the next film will be up in a moment.